Hello and welcome to another English language class today. My name is Happiness Demo, and today we'll be studying Sentence Components Part 1 in the theme English Grammar Structural Patterns. Before we go into our lesson, let's take a look at our objectives for this lesson. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to list the components of sentences, define subjects and identify subjects in sentences, outline the types and features of subjects, define verbs and list the types of verbs, define objects and state their types, and define complements and state their types. Now let's go to our lesson. Every sentence has two parts. When we speak, when we discuss with our friends, we make use of sentences. And every sentence has two parts. That is, we can divide a sentence into two. Let's look at these two parts of sentences. The first part is the subject, and the second part is the predicate. So every sentence, every English language sentence has two parts, the subject and the predicate. Now let's look at these sentences on the board to properly illustrate the parts of sentences. The first sentence is, Sotoye used to be my best friend before I met Ade. Sotoye is the subject, and the whole of this part is the predicate. Everything that makes up this part of the sentence is the predicate. The next sentence says, my classmates nominated me to be the class prefect. My is the subject, and every other thing here is the predicate of this sentence. Grandma spends Christmas holidays with us. Grandma is the subject of this sentence, and spends Christmas holidays with us is the predicate. And lastly, I love my job so much. I is the subject of this sentence, and love my job so much is the predicate. So from these sentences here, we find that they are divided into two parts, the subject and the predicate. Now, apart from the subject of a sentence, the predicate consists of other components. Now, let's take a look at the components of the predicate, or the things that make up the predicate of a sentence. The first we have here is the verb. We have the object, which includes direct and indirect objects. Complements, which includes subject and object complements. Prepositions and prepositional phrases. Infinitives, present participles and past participles acting as adjectives. Modifiers, and gerunds. All these are components of the predicate. So a complete sentence, or most English sentences, would have a subject and these other components listed here. Now we are going to study these components of the sentence one after the other. First we have here is the subject. What is the subject of a sentence? The subject is usually the first part of the sentence. It contains a noun or pronoun and every other word that modifies it. So the subject of a sentence is usually the first part of a sentence, which contains a noun or pronoun and any other word modifying that noun or pronoun. Again, the subject of a sentence refers to the person, thing, or entity that carries out the action expressed by the verb. In other words, the subject is the person, thing, or entity that carries out the action expressed by the verb. It also refers to the person, thing, animal, or entity that is spoken about. in the sentence. In a sentence, the subject is usually a noun, a pronoun, or a noun phrase, or a gerund. Now let's look at these sentences and properly identify the subjects from these sentences. First sentence we have here says, hunters kill animals. Here we have the subject as hunters. And in this sentence, we have the noun hunters as the subject. And then we have, you asked me what my name meant. Here, the pronoun you is the subject of this sentence. So we have pronoun as subject. And then we have, the big black dog barked angrily at me last night. Here we have a noun phrase as the subject. Mind you, a noun phrase is a group of words that has its head element or its head word as a noun. And then the last sentence we have here says, seeing is believing. Here, seeing, which is a gerund, is the subject of this sentence. A gerund is simply a verb, an ing verb, which performs the role of a noun. So these are examples of different elements performing or standing as a subject of sentences. Now let's take a look at some things to note about a subject. How can we identify subjects in sentences? First of all, subjects perform an action. Subjects usually perform an action. Wherever they are found in sentences, they are found performing one action or the other. So this is one way to identify the subject of a sentence. For example, Nnamdi bought me an interesting novel. Nosa swept the sitting room before leaving for school. In the first sentence here, what did Nnamdi do? What was the action? Nnamdi bought. In the second one, what did Nosa do? Nosa swept. So we find that the subject of a sentence usually performs an action. The second way to identify subjects is that they are usually described in sentences. When you have subjects in sentences, you find that in such sentences, these subjects are usually described or talked about. For example, Jumai looked really beautiful at the party last night. This sentence here describes Jumai, and it says she looked really beautiful. This describes how Jumai looked at the party last night. And then secondly, we have the bridesmaids were dressed in purple for the wedding. The bridesmaids were dressed in purple. That describes the subjects, the bridesmaids. So we find that another way to identify subjects in sentences is that they are usually described or talked about. And then a third way to identify subjects in sentences is that subjects are usually identified. Subjects are usually identified in sentences. For example, the new boy from Degema loves to dance. Now, if we have several new boys here, the way to identify the particular one this sentence refers to is that you would ask, where is he from? He's from Degema. Maybe other new boys are from different other ethnic groups and so on and so forth. You can identify this particular new boy because he is from Degema. And then the second sentence we have here says, the kid wearing that hat is very intelligent. Now you can identify this kid because we've described him in this sentence as the kid wearing that hat. So these are the subjects of the sentences because they are identified. And now the last way to identify a subject in a sentence is that a subject usually has an action done to it. Subjects usually have an action done to it. For example, Dapa was celebrated at the office today to mark his birthday. What action was done to Dapa? He was celebrated. And then we have the winners were applauded by the crowd. What action was done to the winners? They were applauded. So these are ways in which we can identify subjects in sentences. Now let's look at the types of subjects we have in English grammar. In English grammar, there are 3 types of subjects. They are the simple subject, the full or complete subject, and the compound subject. Now let's look at these subjects one after the other. What is a simple subject? A simple subject consists of the main noun or a single noun or pronoun without any modifiers. Simple subject consists of a main noun or a single noun or a pronoun without any modifiers or without any words describing it. For example, Bola harvests his crops every year. Bola is a single subject because it consists of just one noun, just a single noun. And then we have my children love to drink milk every day. This also consists of one noun, so it is a single subject. And we also have he submitted the report before the close of work. Here, the subject of this sentence is the pronoun he. So we see here that we have just one pronoun, which stands as the subject of that sentence. And lastly, we have Zamani asked me to wait here. Zamani is also a single noun. So these are examples of simple subjects. The second type of subject is the full or complete subject. What is a full or complete subject? A full or complete subject is made up of the main noun or subject and all the words that modify it. It's made up of the main noun or the main subject and other words that modify that subject. For example, that lovely dress belongs to my sister. The expression, that lovely dress, is a full or complete subject because it consists of the main noun here, which is dress, and these words, that lovely, which describe or modify the word dress. So, that lovely dress is a full or complete subject. Then again, we have the company's driver takes me to work almost every day. The company's driver is a full subject because it consists of the main noun, which is driver, and then the words the company's, which describe the word driver. So that whole expression, the company's driver, is a full subject. And lastly, Okoro's big bag was taken away last night. This also is a full subject because it consists of the main noun, which is bag, and other words modifying it, such as Okoro's and big. So these are examples of full or complete subjects. They simply consist of the main noun and other words which modify that main noun. And then the last type of subject we have is the compound subject. What is a compound subject? A compound subject is a complete subject that consists of two or more simple subjects. That's what a compound subject is. It's made up of two or more simple subjects. And these simple subjects are usually joined by the conjunction and. Now let's look at the examples we have here of compound subjects. Jide and Olamide have been best friends for the past 3 years. Here we have a compound subject, Jide and Olamide. We did say that compound subjects are made up of two or more simple subjects which are joined by the conjunction and. And here we have Jide and Olamide as simple subjects. That is one subject, and they are joined by the the conjunction and. And then we have the new student and the class prefect scored high marks in the test. Here we have two complete subjects joined by the conjunction and. And the complete subjects are the new student and the class prefect. They are linked by the conjunction and. So this whole expression is a compound subject. And lastly, Okonkwo and his younger brother decided to stay back at home. Here we have one simple subject and one complete subject. The simple subject is Okonkwo and the complete subject is his younger brother. Both of them are joined by the conjunction and. So these are examples of compound subjects. For compound subjects, you can have them expressed as one simple subject and another simple subject joined by a conjunction, or one complete subject and a single subject joined by a conjunction, or two complete subjects joined by a conjunction. Now let's look at verbs. This is the second component of sentences. What is a verb? A verb, as we know, refers to a word that speaks about action or a state of being. So we've defined a verb as a word that refers to the part of speech that speaks about an action or a doing word. Verbs also express a state of being. In a sentence, the verb is usually carried out or performed by the subject. So verbs are simply words that refer to actions or a state of being. Now let's look at these examples on the board. The lady threw a stone into the pool. The action word here is threw. This is the verb. You inspire me so much. Inspire is the verb of this sentence. Mrs. Zainab teaches me Hausa language during my spare time. Teaches is the action word, which is the verb. So these are verbs in English language. There are different types of verbs in English grammar. They are action verbs, lexical verbs, auxiliary verbs, linking verbs, finite and non-finite verbs, regular and irregular verbs. In our previous lesson on verbs, we discussed these types of verbs in detail. So I would recommend that you visit those lessons and study them properly. Another sentence component we'll look at is the object. Sometimes we find that verbs act on certain things in sentences, certain people, things, or an entity. Whatever a verb acts on is known as the object of a sentence. Now note that a verb which acts on an object is known as a transitive verb. Now, in English grammar, we have two types of objects. They are the direct object and the indirect object. Now, let's look at these types of objects one after the other. Now, let's look at the direct object. The direct object is a noun or pronoun that receives the action expressed by the verb in a sentence. They are affected by the verb directly. A very easy way to identify direct objects is to ask what or who the verb is acting on. So when you want to identify direct objects in a sentence, you simply ask what or who the verb is acting on. Now let's look at these examples to illustrate what we mean. Tomisin took the bag from Tammy. What did Tomisin take? She took the bag. So the bag is the direct object of this sentence because the verb took directly refers to the bag. And then secondly, the president congratulated the army on their milestone achievement. Army here is the object of this sentence because it is directly related to the verb congratulated. Who did the president congratulate? He congratulated the army. So if you want to identify direct objects easily in sentences, simply ask what or who the verb is acting on. The second type of object we have in English grammar is the indirect object. What is an indirect object? Indirect object refers to a noun or pronoun that is not directly affected by the action of the verb, but specifies to whom or for whom an action is carried out. The direct object is directly affected by the verb, while the indirect object is not directly affected by the verb. Instead, it answers the questions for whom or to whom was an action carried out. Now let's look at these examples on the board. Barine gave her pencil to Suka. Suka here is the indirect object of this sentence, while pencil is the direct object. Now, if I want to identify what the indirect object is from this sentence, I'll simply ask, to whom did Barine give her pencil? And the answer is, she gave her pencil to Suka. So Suka is the indirect object. A second sentence here says, Chiamaka bought her friend a book. For whom did Chiamaka buy a book? She bought a book for her friend. So her friend here is the indirect object, while a book is the direct object. And lastly, the man gave the check to his wife. To whom did the man give the check? The man gave the check to his wife. So his wife is the indirect object of this sentence. Now note that direct objects sometimes precede indirect objects, and at other times, indirect objects precede direct objects. Another component of the sentence is the complement. What is a complement? A complement simply refers to a word or group of words that complete the meaning of the subject or predicate. Simply put, complements are words that describe other words in a sentence, maybe nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, or adverbs. Complements simply provide additional information about other words in a sentence. Now, in English grammar, there are two types of complements. They are the subject complement and the object complement. Let's discuss them one after the other. Subject complements are words that provide more information about the subject of a sentence. Subject complements are words that simply describe the subject of a sentence. They give you additional information. They modify the subject of a sentence. And they are usually nouns or adjectives that rename the subject of that sentence. For example, Osadolo is a teacher. Teacher here describes Osadolo. So teacher is the subject complement of this sentence. Suleiman was my driver before he left for the village. Driver is the subject complement of this sentence because it describes the noun Suleiman. Mathematics is easy for me to handle. Easy is the complement because it describes the subject, mathematics. The nurse seems nice. Nice is a complement of the subject, nurse. Now note that complements, subject complements, usually come after linking verbs, as we have in these examples on the board. Is a linking verb. Was, is, since are all linking verbs. So, subject complements usually occur after linking verbs in sentences. Now, what are object complements? Just like subject complements, object complements are words that describe the object of a sentence. They provide additional information about the object of a sentence. They usually follow the direct object of the sentence. They also modify or refer to the direct object. An object complement can be a noun, adjective, or any word that acts as a noun or adjective. For example, we elected Jessica team leader of our volleyball team. The expression team leader is the object complement because it provides information about the object, Jessica. My class made me class captain of my class. Class captain is the object complement for me. Me here is the object of this sentence. And then we have, your attitude made your mom upset last night. Upset is the object complement for your mom. Your mom is the object of this sentence. The supervisor always kept the engineers busy with some work. Busy is the object complement for the engineers because it describes the engineers. So basically, object complements describe the object of sentences. It gives more information about the objects of sentences. We've come to the end of our lesson today on sentence components part 1. But before we end, let's take a look at all we have learned so far. Today we learned that sentences are divided into subject and predicate. The subject of a sentence is a person, thing, or entity that performs the action spoken about by the verb. We also learned that the types of subjects are simple subjects, full or complete subjects, and compound subjects. We also learned today that the verb refers to the part of speech that speaks about an action or a state of being. We also learned that the object of a sentence refers to the entity that receives the action spoken about by the verb. And also, in English grammar, there are two kinds of objects: direct object and indirect object. We also learned today that complements are words that provide more information about the nouns in a sentence. And lastly, we learned that the types of complements are subject and object complements. Now let's go to our test section. Our question says, identify the complement in the sentence below. After sports yesterday, I felt so exhausted. What is the complement in this sentence? Is it A, yesterday, B, felt, or C, exhausted? The correct answer is C, exhausted. We did say that complements are words that describe nouns or pronouns in a sentence. That is the subject or object of a sentence. And the word exhausted describes how I felt, describes how the subject felt. So exhausted is the correct answer. Our second question says, pick out the direct object of the following sentence. Did mother buy the dress for Halima or Fatima? What is the direct object of this sentence? Is it A, Fatima, B, mother, C, dress, or D, Halima? The correct answer is dress. Dress is the direct object of this sentence because it is directly related or affected by the verb buy. What did mother buy? Mother bought the dress. And now we've come to the very end of our lesson today on sentence components part 1. Thank you for watching and see you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel. You can also turn on notifications to stay updated on new videos on this channel. This Brain Friend video was brought to you by Synforest. For more of these amazing e-learning videos, get your copy of Brain Friend. With more than 1,000 e-learning videos, over 74,000 test items in more than 40 subjects, a career counseling guide, and many other amazing features, BrainFriend remains your foremost e-learning and exam preparatory software. BrainFriend. Learn better, make excellent grades.